All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Zoom presentation with Andy DeBoer. I'm Chad Harpo, president of RCAI. I know we have a lot of guests on tonight's presentation, which is fantastic. I just want to give a quick pitch and overview for the Railroadiana Collectors Association. We are a nonprofit organization started in 1971, so we've been around for over 50 years now, and are the largest group of Railroadiana collectors and I guess the trade association, if you will, for railroad collectors in the world. Our membership includes everyone that collects things from dining car china to timetables to builder plate number plates, locomotive hardware like whistles and lanterns and all things in between. Our organization puts out a quarterly newsletter called The Express. Our editor, Wes Ross, is on this presentation tonight, as well as we do these Zoom presentations around 4 times a year for the interest of our members and potential members. So if you're not a member, we highly encourage you to please check us out at railroadcollectors.org and consider joining us today. Again, we do these presentations about 4 times a year. This presentation is being recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel in the upcoming weeks. If you want to check out previous presentations, it's as simple as going to YouTube, typing in Railroadiana Collectors Association, and our YouTube channel will pop up, and you'll see several presentations by Andy, as well as other members of RCAI that have been presented in the last couple of years. So with that, I want to go through a couple of housekeeping notes before I introduce our guest speaker. We'll run about an hour tonight. About 50 minutes of it will be presentation. At the end, we'll leave as much time as we need for question and answer. There's multiple ways to ask your question, including typing your question into the Q&A box. If you're on a desktop computer or a tablet, you likely see a Q&A tab along the bottom of your screen. We'll also, at the end, if you want to ask a question verbally, you can hit the raise hand button and we will call upon you to ask your question. And again, we'll go through those and take as much time as we need to make sure everybody's questions or comments are addressed. With that, I want to thank all of you all for joining us and your interest in RCAI. Again, if you're a member of RCAI, we greatly appreciate your membership and all that you do to make this organization what it is today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, who is really no guest at this point. He's becoming a seasoned veteran, Andy DeBoer. Andy has collected Railroadiana for many years. He and his wife, Judy, who is our current RCAI secretary, collect railroad dining china and paper, majoring in Western railroads, Fred Harvey related collectibles, including postcards and Western U.S. national parks. Andy served as a board member for the Yellowstone Historic Center, now the Museum of the Yellowstone, for over 10 years. He and his wife are responsible for 2 major exhibits at the Yellowstone Park, including the 2006 to 2008 dining car china of the 5 railroads, the 2015 to 16 Meet Me at Old Faithful Inn, the Union Pacific Railroad, the Yellowstone National Park, and the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exhibition, San Francisco, 1915. In 2022, he gave a presentation for RCAI titled Yellowstone, the 5 Railroads, a Collectibles Tour, which was fantastic. And he also gave that presentation at the Collecting Yellowstone event held in Bozeman, Montana. He has given previous presentations to RCAI in October of 2020 entitled Railroad Paper, Vintage Images of a Lost Era, and again, the Yellowstone 5 Railroads, a Collectibles Tour. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy. And Andy, thank you as always for your time. These presentations are not put together, as you will see, last minute, and we greatly appreciate the thought and time and dedication that you put in to present the information in such an informative and entertaining way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy. And again, folks, stay tuned. If you have any questions or comments, we'll be happy to take those at the end. So Andy, we appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Chad, for your kind words, obviously, and welcome all you all. And that's from my Southern friends. Special welcome to any Fred Harvey junkies that may have joined us tonight. Thanks for being here. The Fred Harvey Company has long been synonymous with rail travel and the Santa Fe Railway. In particular, the company opened its first restaurant in Topeka, Kansas in 1876 at the depot in Topeka. From there, it built an empire that stretched from Cleveland to Chicago and on to Los Angeles, and until 1930, in cooperation with the Frisco to the south into Texas and southeast, even as far as Florida. The company reached its nadir in 1950s and revived into the 70s. The product was hospitality, not real estate, food service, restaurants, dining cars, but also newsstands and a variety of shops and personal services and hotels. We're going to look tonight at a few significant dates. First of all, for the Fred Harvey Company, just to place some of the things in context. The menus are frequently dated and identified as to location. So that sort of allows us to fit some of those things together in terms of when operations existed. So although tonight we're not going to be doing the first section that I'll reference in a minute, it's sort of a history tour at the same time. I've been collecting railroad stuff, as Chad mentioned, for years, and I've been working on this menu project now for the last couple of years. Believe it or not, it currently has over 500 slides, and you're in luck because I won't show them all tonight, okay? I've divided these, at least for the moment, into 18 different sections. We'll take a quick look at those as well, 3 of which, in my opinion, are more directly related to Railroadiana interests, and I've picked those for tonight. They're the Santa Fe name trains. The World War II military will be of general interest. And then, of course, the prior to 1930 Frisco relationship between the Frisco Railroad and the Santa Fe as well. Hundreds of Fred Harvey Company and successor organization AMVAC and Xanterra menus have survived. And for this PowerPoint presentation, as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at 3 of them. So here we go. Maybe. Here are the select dates that I've chosen. I'm not going to go through all of them. One of which I've already mentioned is the 1876, and then recognize that it goes all the way through. There's a couple of interesting points along the way. 1897 to 1930, of course, was the cooperative venture with the Frisco, and I'll have a thing more to say about that when we get to that section. In 1930, the Harvey operations moved east with the opening of the Cleveland Union Terminal, and the company name that operated that section of the division was known as Harvey Inc. rather than the Fred Harvey Company. And the Fred Harvey Company retained responsibilities for Chicago and West. Both entities had the same owners and executives. Dining car operations ended in 1968 in December. And Santa Fe all the way became the model. Then there were some changes, obviously, in 88. Generally, we think of AmFac Corporation as jumping in at that point, but actually that went through the J&B Realty Company of Chicago that acquired AmFac. Another interesting point that's frequently asked was with Fred Harvey, we associate now frequently with the south rim of the Grand Canyon operations. Were they ever in the north rim? Here's a little tidbit for you to think about. 1995, AmFac and Fred Harvey then purchased TW Services, including the concessions at the Grand Canyon North Rim. So yes, in fact, for a while, AmFac, as a successor to Fred Harvey, did operate concessions at the Grand Canyon North Rim. And there are some menu items that, in fact, have that notation on them. We're probably aware of the name change to Xanterra, and in 2008, the Unschultz Company of Colorado purchased Xanterra from J&B Realty of Chicago. Another note that filters through some of this is in 1971, May 1, Amtrak took over passenger rail service in the U.S. These are my menu categories, and there's nothing sacred about them. That's just my version of things. The first is the largest section. I actually begin that with a menu from 1882 from Topeka House. I'm not going to go down that road tonight. It would take entirely too long. And it continues through the Fred Harvey airport operations in Albuquerque in the late 50s, Grand Rapids, Michigan, starting about 1963, and then followed by the airport marina hotels and restaurants in Fresno, San Francisco, Las Vegas, Dallas, Fort Worth, and finally a momentary stop in Minneapolis before fading from the scene. Most of these sections are self-explanatory. Section 16, I'll just reference here for a moment. I've simply included in that section a whole bunch of tabletop related items, menu holders, silverware, flatware, and the like, including sweet things that Fred Harvey sold in its shops in the Union stations at that time. Number 17, those are Fred Harvey postcards, and many of them show dining rooms, dining cars, and restaurants. So I've got a section on that as well. The postscript section are those restaurants that are currently in operation that are based on the legacy of the Fred Harvey Company. So let's give it a go. The Fred Harvey Company spanned, and it doesn't show that on this particular card, all the way from Cleveland to Chicago, where this postcard starts, down to Galveston, and then all the way west to San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the red dots are Santa Fe hotels and dining stations, so they were extremely numerous. Almost all of them are gone. I also collect Fred Harvey postcards and have more than you can imagine. But what's interesting about this one is a logo on the backside that you don't often see. And so there aren't many postcards with that particular logo. I think most of the time you're used to seeing the circle with the FH in it, or other markings such as is duplicated here on the side of this card with the Fred Harvey Company in one form or another. We'll take a look and at how that expands when we look at the Frisco menus. I'll have a map at that point just as well. Here are the Santa Fe name train menus. And this, again, as my other presentations, is a visual tour. So we're simply going to look. Before I do that, this is probably an example of how not to make a slide. But I stole this information, and there are 3 of these. And I'll give credit on the last one as to where I got this information. It's surprising how many name trains the Santa Fe actually had. As you can tell by this list, I've put some in color. Those are some menus that we'll take a look at in a few minutes. There's another third of the list, and finally the balance. And this came from the internet at a site run by John Cornett out of California. So thank you for the use of that information. Here's the first menu. This is from 1900. I think it's, again, and I may say this repeatedly, at least for the early menus, delightful art on these. What's interesting here is there are 3 variations of this particular menu. But until I started looking at these closely and scanning them, I never saw the little detail on this one that's actually down here. And the reason I didn't see it is because it was very, very faint. So with the help of Photoshop, I could retrace those letters in the colors that you see here. And what we have is I've amplified it down here, and it's about in that script, copyright 1900 by Fred Harvey. That's substantiated by the sketches, which have a signature on them. I assume it's pronounced Gahdy, G-A-H-D-Y, with a 00, again, 1900. So these are the earliest name train menus that I have. And the variations, and I'll start here. Here's another one. Notice the California Limited is now on the front. It's the same sketches. And the Santa Fe Dining Car Service by Fred Harvey is on the left side of the interior menu. In many of these slides, I'll give you the size information, so you've got some appreciation for, in this particular case, how small they were, just 4 by 6 inches. And there's another variation where almost all of the information is on the front, and all you see on the inside is the menu, as well as the sketch on the back. And again, the early 1900s. Here's another different scene, but similar to the ones that we see before, and all the information here is on the inside, including the California Limited information here at the top. Slight variation where it changes in terms of position of the credits. And a third, completely different again, of the young little Native American chap there with what looks like a rabbit or something like that. So again, these are all early 1900s. Notice also that the sketching on the menu itself changes here as well. Another slightly different variation. Here's an interesting piece. It's like a brochure, not very many pages, 3 or 4. But on the left is the cover, and it's a letter from Mr. Reeve. Mr. Reeve is the second vice president and general manager of the Grand Trunk Railway System in Canada, and it's written to Mr. Harvey while he was at the Windsor Hotel in Montreal on November of 1900. And his letter is here. I'm not going to read it completely, but it's a letter that acknowledges that he is very experienced in dining room matters, and the Fred Harvey Company experience on the California Limited that apparently he traveled in the 1900s could not be exceeded by any other service. So it included the covers front and back, his picture, the letter, and it included the menu there as well. Some other California Limited menus, obviously involving Southwestern art that looks like almost a sand painting on the front cover, and the reference to the menu. This is, I suspect, about 1905. And when I put a CA in front, that's my best guess. If anybody knows anything more than what I know, you can let me know. There's another one with a sand painting feature on the front, and a little Southwestern art on the back as well. Again, my guess about 1905. And a third, similar, but yet different in terms of the cover art. Things don't get much better than that, as we'll see shortly. This is an interesting, and I've got a couple of these. These menus are creased a quarter of the way in on each side, as you can see here. I'm sorry, my pointer is no longer transparent, and you can see that line here. I suspect that you could fold that a little bit. Not only could you cover the menu, I suppose, and present it, but it would also stand up on the table. So take your pick in terms of how that may have occurred. Oops, sorry. There's another version, and the dinner menu and the artwork is all on the same side. This one's from 1913. And now we go to the plain Jane, so to speak, California Limited menus, 1911 and 1925. It's really too bad that artwork could have continued forever as far as I'm concerned, but it didn't, and we'll live with it. Here we go. These are the previous slide. Those were single page menus. This is a folded menu, and there were several variations of that, and we'll see that in terms of the position of the California Limited and some other details. 1927. There you see the variation on the cover all the way to 1950. Very similar, and only slight variations from time to time. There was other paper that one could find occasionally. This is dining station meal service for the California Limited, about 1950. And as this sheet says on the inside, meals for the California Limited passengers west of La Junta were at dining stations. And then the list is there Some of them you may remember, most of them are gone. Obviously, the greatest sin ever committed in terms of demolitions was the Fred Harvey Hotel in Albuquerque. We could have lunch in Gallup, dinner at Williams at the Fray Marcos, also gone. Breakfast in Seligman if you were eastbound at the Havasu, which I think was one of the cutest and most delightful Fred Harvey houses on the route. Also gone, demolished by the BNSF just a few years ago, and lunch at Winslow and so on. So there's some general information dated from about the 50s. Changing gears, here's the Golden State menu running in Central California. This is from 1939. Again, a Golden Gate menu, the plain Jane version from 1950. San Francisco Chief in 1954, and an advertising piece. I don't know if you can see that slide. I've got my, let me see if there we go. Chico says, try early dinner only for $1.95, compared to the stuff we're hearing about a meal at McDonald's costing $20 nowadays for a fairly fancy hamburger, but the $1.95 days are obviously gone. The Chicagoan and the Kansas Cityan, self-explanatory in terms of where they ran. The Chicagoan was the name of the train going north to Chicago from Kansas City. The Kansas Cityan was the train going the other way from 1940. There were some name train brochures that weren't quite so obvious, and this is the first one of them. This is part of the artist series, and I've got 3 sections of menus related to artists, again, not tonight. And so this is the Chicagoan and the Kansas City in 1950, and the San Francisco Peaks near Flagstaff, and that scene has remained largely unchanged, painted by the artist Louis Aiken in the early 1900s, also did a number of Grand Canyon paintings as well. On the back side of the menu is the details describing the painter that provided the artwork for the cover here. The San Diegan, a couple of versions of this. This one's 1933, and here's a variation from 1942. This is in part a military menu. I've chosen to leave it in with the name trains. The military menus, as we'll see shortly, were entirely military. We didn't have the name train on the covers and things like that. So this is another version of the San Diegan, and most of the World War II related military menus were obviously from 1940 to 1945. El Capitan from Chicago to California, 1939. Also more than one variation. Here's another one, 1942. Again, partially military, the El Capitan version in 1943. And a little advertising piece from 1959. Take your pick. Here's some sample meals. Come take the train rather than your car. The Super Chief, one of the Cracker Jack chains. This is a 1936 menu. The Chief on the right, 34. Different Chief menu this time, multi-page, fold open from 1927. The Super Chief, 1939, and a linen postcard made by Kurtike out of Chicago. The print date on that card happens to be 1946. Another Super Chief, this time with a back cover with Navy insignias. Slightly different Super Chief 43. The Grand Canyon Limited, not to be confused with the current Grand Canyon train that's running from Williams to the Grand Canyon. That's currently owned by Xanterra, the successor company to AmFac, now owned by Anschutz out of Denver. And so this is the Grand Canyon Limited from Chicago to the West Coast, although it obviously took passengers to the Grand Canyon and either took the cars off or switched passengers in Williams. Another Grand Canyon Limited, slight variation. Again, another from 1930s. And then ultimately the simple single card menus from 1948. This is also Grand Canyon Limited. And I put it here because it's got the name train listed over here in the lower right, the Grand Canyon Limited. This type of menu also appears in the Harvey Girls menu section of my menus here. So this is a typical 6x9 with the Harvey Girl on the front. And this is 1946, about the time that movie came out. Ranger, another named train, this time 34, Kansas City to Chicago. Slight variation, 42. And here again, a little more subtle, but it is in fact the Santa Fe dining car, the Ranger, as you can see in the lower left. In this particular time, it's Delano's painting of the ponies. September of 1947 is that menu. And the Scout, another named train, 1937, 1940. These are single page menus, 5 by 6 inches or thereabouts. So, and many of them had, the purple date stamps on the top, which I'm grateful for. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a clue as to roughly when those came out. A couple of other Scout menus, kind of things, probably from the first one, 1937, and the other probably from the 40s. The Tulsian is a named train, the Tulsan, that ran from Tulsa to Kansas City, connected with several Santa Fe, Chicago to West Coast trains in Kansas City. And you can see that named there again at the bottom left in that menu, which then opens up along with the artist description on the back. And there's a Kansas City and Tulsa schedule in the upper right with a little detail there as well. This one, you have to look a little deeper, and thanks to my friend that knows more about these trains than I do. This is train 47 and 48. That's the oil flyer, which also operated Tulsa to Kansas City and connected with those transcontinental trains there as well. But the only clue is down here on the menu where you see the code for the train numbers. And then if you go back and you can identify that, that's how this is identified as an oil flyer menu. Santa Fe dining car service. This is the Denver, and you can see that once you open it up. It's not available as a lip that sticks out, but it's down here in the lower right. The Santa Fe Super Chief and or El Capitan carried a Denver connection set of cars that were separated at Hunt and then on to Denver. That section was probably referred to as a Denver on the menus. That's my current interpretation, and we'll leave it at that because that's not my strong point. The Turquoise Room. Here's the opening announcement, announcing the opening of the Turquoise Room with the new Super Chief and its inaugural run between Chicago and Los Angeles, January 28, 1951. And you see the picture of the Turquoise Room on that train. There's actually a car in the, I think it's the Arizona Railroad Museum south and southeast side of Phoenix. And you can actually walk through there and see the remnants of the Turquoise Room in one of those cars. There's a Turquoise Room plate. And for those of you that don't know, there were actually two versions of that plate. And the difference is that if you look at the location of the Turquoise Room, this one's approximately at 9 o'clock. There's another one where the Turquoise Room printing is lower at about the 7 o'clock position, but again, left of center. Great charger plates or service plates. And remember, you didn't eat from them. As soon as they brought your food, they snapped that plate out of the way. But some of them managed to survive, and some of them wound up in collectors' hands, including mine. So that announcement's relatively small. It's 5 by 7 inches folded. Some of you may have seen the later Super Chief menus, and those were very large, 14 by 17 inches. but mostly a carrier, and we'll see one of those in a minute as well. Here, part of that inaugural run, January 20, 1951, the preview trip dinner menu for the turquoise room on that train. And this was the same set of events prior to its official launch. And this was probably from some celebration at Kansas City Union Terminal. And here's that large menu, like I said, about 14 by or 11 by 14 inches. And it has a pocket in it, and that in turn has two menus and the description of the turquoise room on the back side. And here are those two menus. The high price spread was the champagne dinner on the left. And I believe that should be 9/1/1970. We'll correct that in the next version. And then the more modestly priced menu, which is also seen separately in many of these menus, and I'm sure in a lot of collections as well. This was an advertising piece to advertise the turquoise room, sent to ticket agents and so on, and travel advisors. And this is amazingly large. The envelope itself is about 15 by 12 inches. And this thing opens completely to be almost 28 inches wide. And again, you see the picture typically associated here with the turquoise room. Military menus. Not quite so many, but here they are. Army identification aid to wings. Frequently, the backside was for the menu and a message, and we'll see some of those, but Army personnel had free postal service franking privileges, so they didn't have to pay for any postage. So these things did make it around the country. This specific one happens to be from El Tovar and identifies an aid to wings identification for the U.S. Army. This is U.S. Navy plane identification from the Gran Quivira in Clovis, New Mexico, 1945. And you can see the message here on the back with the address as well. But they paid for postage on that one, so probably not military. This is an interesting variation. The others have all the insignia stuff, blue, white, red, and so on. But this one, look at what it says here. I'll just read you quickly. The sections are all the same. Our fighting men want playing cards, so please drop your decks in the box at any of our hotels, restaurants, or shops to be distributed by the USO. So this particular menu is Chicago Union Station, 1943. An aid to uniform identification, in this particular one showing the ladies of the armed services. The menu itself is from Chicago Union Station. Insignia recognition for the armies. Again, a Union Station, this time in St. Louis, and a supper menu. Army's recognition, Bakersfield, California. And the postcard at the bottom is a Santa Fe Station Inn Hotel in Bakersfield. It's an H3102, also printed by Kurt Tyke. The print date on that particular card is 1924. This is a single card menu, the menu on one side and the Army insignias on the other. Again, guessing, but I'm sure it's pretty close, 1944. Here's another one for the early 40s. Again, this is just the menu folder. It has no menu printing on it, so it's just the cover and blank elsewhere. The Marines, not to be outdone, the Union Station out of Houston, Texas. And again, a message by Bob to hi, good looking. So probably to a girlfriend or fiance. And the postage on that one is marked free. You see that right over there. And so he's eaten at Cleveland and St. Louis and at Houston, as he describes in the message to his friend. Allied flags and the luncheon menu for Union Station in St. Louis, 43. The evolution of the flag. also that same era. Again, in this particular case, an Altovar menu. Frisco lines. Well, let's begin by looking at where the Frisco Railroad operated. And recall that most of the Santa Fe was from this area in the direction to the west. What's interesting here is that Memphis is located right in the middle of that circle. Sorry to block it out. And then you see that line extending all the way to the east, initially to Pensacola. And then from Birmingham on, the lines are lighter. So that's the other railroads, the Seaboard Airline Railway and the Southern, that ultimately will get passengers to Jacksonville and St. Petersburg, Tampa area. What's also interesting is if you look at this is an ink blotter, and the Sunnyland train here began operation in 1925. But if you take a look at the expanded version of this, which is over here, note on the bottom, dining car service all the way, Fred Harvey meals on the Frisco. Also interesting is that there are a number of Fred Harvey postcards, actually, obviously prior to 1930, that were of Alabama and Mississippi. So there's probably 6 to 10 of various ones. And one of these here is the Florida Special crossing the Little Warrior River in Alabama on the Frisco. It's a Fred Harvey postcard made by Detroit Publishing Company. And this postcard is about 1916. A couple of other single-page Frisco menus, handwritten. The first one's 1929. The others, I'm guessing, is also from the 20s. Very simple, unlike what we're going to see here in a second. This one is one of the touring company menus, also dining car service by Fred Harvey on the Frisco. And another Frisco menu about 1920. Here's the I think the most interesting, and this is courtesy of a friend. I don't own this one, but he's allowed me to regale you with it, if you will. You don't see much decoration on the Frisco menus except for this one. And you can see that blue bonnet representation in the upper right. So that's got to be the coolest one. And one more. The Memphian, going to Memphis, where I pointed that out on the map. Fred Harvey postcards frequently were published in sets. This is the Memphis set. What's interesting about this particular one, note that in fact it does say Fred Harvey. The Fred Harvey Company had a newsstand in Memphis, so this was undoubtedly sold there. The postcards themselves do not have the Fred Harvey imprimatur on them. These are generic postcards published by the HHT Company in Denver. Most of the hundreds of other sets that were produced by the Fred Harvey Company did, in fact, have markings of the Fred Harvey Company on the postcards, but not in this particular case. And finally, let me make a plug for the late John Reed's book, Nothing Could Be Finer Than a Frisco Diner, which describes dining services not only prior to 1930, but since that time until they ended in the 60s. That book is out of print, but it's still available on the internet. It's a nice read. It's got lots of colorful examples of items related to dining on the Frisco. And then, at least for the Fred Harvey junkies, at the last Fred Harvey weekend in Santa Fe, last October, I think it was, Dick Luckin made a presentation of a not quite yet completed work that he was doing on a video of the railroad stations in American life. That has now been published and is available from Kalmbach out of Milwaukee. So those are my 2 advertising plugs. And hopefully what we've done is entertained you with at least 3 of the sections in my menu project, namely the name trains, the military ones, and the Frisco Railway. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And again, thanks for listening.
Well, Andy, thanks for that. And we look forward to future installments as you continue to work on this project. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions, comments. Again, you're free to type questions into the chat or the Q&A. And if you want to verbally ask your question, feel free to hit the raise hand button, and we'll call on you to ask the question over the air here. So Andy, while they're doing that, one of the things that you and I have discussed that's always fascinated about, or fascinated me about Fred Harvey, was the push into the East, particularly with the Cleveland connection there. I somewhat have a theory that they were trying to get in with the Van Swearens roads, and maybe continue to infiltrate that portion of the country. I don't know if you have any more information or thoughts or data on that to back up that theory, but it's interesting that they did at least make a push into the East.
Well, I have thoughts. I have no facts. I have no details. But as long as you're thinking, and there's probably no charge for that. Cleveland is a stepping stone to New York City, and that's where the population is. Obviously, that never worked out. The Fred Harvey company ran out of gas. Remember, it was a private company, and they never owned much in the way of real estate. They were a service provider. So, the conjecture is that, and they didn't want to go public, or at least didn't go public. So the amount of capital that they had simply didn't allow them to expand dramatically. But you're right, Cleveland is interesting. The Harvey Inc. company is interesting in that regard. And it was quite a separate operation, and that's evidenced in, for example, their postcards. There were a series of 20 postcards that were produced by the Fred Harvey company. Again, not the subject of discussion here, but fascinating to me, and certainly to postcard junkies like me. And that is, the logo on the back is triangular and not circular, and it simply says Harvey Inc. on all 20 of those postcards. And they were produced just before obviously 1930, in that era, as the Detroit Publishing Company was in its death throes.
All right, we have a question. Any Fred Harvey in Minnesota that you're aware
of? No, but Wisconsin, yes, in Milwaukee. That's evidenced in the menus I have in section 1. Not in Minnesota, as far as I know. Oh, yes and no. Right at the tail end of AmFac hotel operations, I mentioned the airport marina hotels. There was, in fact, a hotel built in Minneapolis, also to be considered as one of the airport marina hotels, to go along with the others whose names and locations I mentioned earlier. And that was in Minneapolis, and it was to be managed by the Fred Harvey, or the successor AmFac. That's as close as it got. It turns out that I don't think it ever opened under the management of AmFac. If it did, it was a matter of days, because it became a Marriott shortly after it was completed. That's as close, I think, as I know and am aware, that Fred Harvey and its successor AmFac ever got to Minnesota.
All right, we've got a question on Fred Harvey China. Is China marked Fred Harvey Incorporated, INC period, rare?
Yes. If it's marked Harvey Inc., it was that division of the Harvey Corporation that was responsible for the operations in Cleveland. So it's interesting. I have a demi set that I haven't really shown, but I'll probably turn it loose to some Fred Harvey fans here in a couple of weeks. Interestingly enough, on the back, it's made by Bauscher in Germany, and it's a saucer and a cup. It's very lightweight china, very thin, and I suspect that's a very real contributing reason why it doesn't exist very much. About 1927, and it's marked on the back initially as the Fred Harvey Company. But I have a matching cup dated 1930 that's marked Harvey Inc. And I believe, and also if you look at some of the silverware like teapots, sugar pots, and things of that type, you will see a lot of silver hollowware marked as Harvey Inc. on the back. That's all related to the Cleveland operations.
Fascinating. Got another question. Is the only size turquoise room plate is that the same in your picture? Are there other sizes, I think is the question.
No, it was only made as a charger plate, at least 10 inches. Some of them were 10 and a half inches. So there's nothing else that was specifically made that we can say, okay, that's the stuff they really ate from in the turquoise room.
Yeah, and then we have a follow-up to the turquoise room. The car, there is a turquoise room dome parked in Winslow that still exists.
Okay.
That came from Brad Black.
Yep, that's at the La Posada.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Not seeing any. If there's any last minute questions. Oh, we have one. Got Carl coming in. Carl, if you can unmute your line.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thanks for the great presentation. Lots of information, and I also am a postcard collector and a Santa Fe fan big time. So it was nice to see all this information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Carl.
My pleasure.
Any other questions or comments? Well, Andy, thanks again. I'll echo Carl's statement. This has been extremely informative and entertaining. A lot of action packed into a presentation here as always. And again, appreciate your time and effort that you put into these things for RCAI. So thank you greatly.
You're welcome.
And with that, I'll close by saying stay tuned for our next presentation, our next RCAI presentation. We're going to take the summer off. We have found these presentations with everything going on with folks in the summer. They're more widely attended and enjoyed in the fall through the spring. So our next presentation will have George Ty and company present on Union Pacific shields, which will be informative for those that collect builder plates and locomotive hardware. Should be a great interest to folks both in RCAI and outside the organization. And again, this presentation was recorded and will be live on our YouTube channel within a couple of weeks. So with that, again, thank you all for your time and thanks for attending tonight's presentation. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot.
Good night.